Hey everyone, Random through here, and I just want to say how grateful and amazed and surprised I am at how many people watched part one of this series. I really wasn't expecting that, and it made me feel really happy and excited. So, you asked for it. Here's part two of What If Darth Vader from A New Hope switched bodies with Anakin from Attack of the Clones. Vader woke up not long after falling asleep, having another forced premonition of his mother dying at the hands of the Tusken Raiders. He was, of course, still in his old quarters in the Jedi Temple. Back when he originally had these visions, they did not come until a few days from now, when he was on Naboo with Padme. He could only assume that because of the combination of his higher strength and attunement in the Force being brought back into this fully intact body, which had more midichlorians than his burnt and mutilated body, he was receiving the premonitions earlier than he had originally. Or, that would be a great display of attention to detail on the part of the conductor of this simulation. But at this point, Vader was finally entertaining the possibility that perhaps this is no simulation. He had no idea how this would be possible, but Darth Vader was no novice in the art of manipulation and illusion. He had experienced and executed enough deception, had endured enough nightmares of reliving his past to recognize the difference between a dream and reality. Not just through instinct and feeling alone, but through the Force itself, a much more reliable source. If this was some sort of illusion, it would have to be induced through some sort of technology, creating a convincing artificial world from the memories of his past. But even then, Vader was not convinced of such a possibility. Vader was not exactly a deep sleeper, and the places where he slept were not exactly easy to access. Even if some guard with a death wish was foolish enough to approach him in his bacta tank, to try to place some kind of device or induce him with a sedative, Vader would immediately sense his presence and his intention through the Force, and quickly awake out of his slumber. No, Vader could sense, through the Force, that everything around him was real. He could feel the living Force itself, not an easy thing to replicate, to say the least. Vader did not want to fully surrender himself to believing this was real. But he would not allow his fear to cause him to have greater faith in his skepticism than in what most likely is the truth. He considered the possibilities. If all this was fake, and he were to take the actions that he would take as if he knew it were real, what would the worst case scenario be? If, when he awoke, his master Sidious, or some other creature was standing there, sneering and cackling, then there would be temporary humiliation, which he would instantly channel into his raging power in the dark side to snap said creature in two. If they were not Darth Sidious. In the grand scheme of things, was it worth risking a forfeit of a real second chance, just to try to deprive the hypothetical conductor of this hypothetical simulation of whatever reaction they wanted from Vader? No. And if this is real, he knows the Jedi had told him that he was the chosen one. He knew of his power and his potential. Perhaps he unintentionally utilized his power in the Force to transfer his mind through time into his younger body, triggered by some subconscious part of himself locked deep away that wanted a second chance. Or perhaps the will of the living Force itself was to cause this transference. Whatever the case was, Vader used his reasoning and logic, as well as his faith in the understanding that his power in the Force gave him, to conclude that it was more likely that this was indeed his new, or rather his old, reality. He would not risk Padme. He would not risk his mother. The time for planning was now. He had contemplated what he would do differently was seen to be countless times before. Now, he need only flesh out every last detail. Vader knew that at this very moment, his mother Shmi was being held captive by the Tusken Raiders. For he remembered that by the time he had the visions of his mother dying on Naboo with Padme, and left to Tatooine to check on her, Klieg Lars notified Anakin that she'd been kidnapped by the Tusken Raiders a month ago. Vader also knew that tomorrow there would be a failed assassination attempt on Padme. Although when this originally happened, Padme survived, Vader was not willing to bet on that happening again. He would not take any chances. Vader decided he would leave an anonymous tip to notify Senator Amidala that her life is in danger, because she is being hunted by a bounty hunter, and that it would not be safe to land on the platform on Coruscant, and to stay put on Naboo for now under heavy guard. Then he would depart immediately for Tatooine to save his mother. But Vader knew tomorrow he would be called upon by Darth Sidious parading as Chancellor Palpatine to become Padme's bodyguard alongside Obi-Wan. And if he were to be absent in that time of need, without any excuse or plausible deniability by himself, he could be disciplined or outright expelled from the Jedi Order. Vader, of course, had no love for the Jedi. But he knew that being assigned to guard Padme on Naboo is what enabled them to be alone together and fall in love. Trying to court Padme and have alone time with her enough to convince her to give their relationship a chance would most likely prove very difficult for someone who was just expelled from the Jedi Order, as she would be heavily under guard and very busy in her duties, and it was not until she came to spend time with Anakin that she would change her view of him from that little boy she knew on Tatooine. It is very likely that in that scenario, she would not give him the time of day. So although he hated the very thought of it, he would need to ask Obi-Wan's help with this. But first, he needed to leave the anonymous tip as quickly as possible. Using his years of training and experience, Vader easily snuck out of the Jedi Temple without anyone noticing. He snuck onto a flying vehicle that was transporting some cargo into a shady part of the streets of Coruscant. He stayed hidden in the shadows and looked for any criminals that had a mask. He found one and easily managed to separate him from his friends without anyone noticing and knocked him unconscious, stealing his mask. Killing him would cause his friends to cause a manhunt when they eventually did not hear from him for several days, and Vader did not need that level of chaos. But their friend waking up with his mask missing and having no idea who stole it was simply par for the course for the criminal underbelly of Coruscant. Vader used his blue lightsaber to change the pattern on the mask ever so slightly to make it totally unrecognizable. Then he stalked in the shadows once more and found an unsuspecting fellow with a comlink walking by himself. He pulled him into the shadows and spoke with a menacing voice, altering it not only to sound threatening, but different from his typical tone, so as to take all possible measures to hide his identity. He told him to leave an anonymous tip right here and now with his comlink directly to Padme Amidala, as he had planned. He instructed him to not mention how he heard this tip, and not to mention him to anyone. If he did, he knew how to find him, and he knew what would happen to him. The frightened fellow did as instructed, and upon hearing Captain Gregor Typho asking who this was, how they heard this tip, and how they knew Senator Amidala's personal contact information, he hung up immediately. Vader was satisfied, knowing that since Gregor Typho was in charge of Padme's security, he would take the tip seriously and keep Padme from the assassination attempt. Vader returned to the Jedi Temple unnoticed and made his way to Obi-Wan's room. If Obi-Wan would be skeptical and reluctant, Vader would just need to be all the more insistent and convincing. Master, wake up, Vader said after having opened Obi-Wan's door standing in his room. Obi-Wan opened his eyes and looked up at his Padawan. Anakin, I know I said to wake up earlier this time, but this once again borders on the extreme. Vader walked closer to Obi-Wan. Master, I have had a vision in the Force. I know why I have been dreaming of my mother. She is in great danger. She has been captured by Tusken Raiders, and she could be killed at any moment. Please, come with me and help me save her. Obi-Wan sat up with a concerned and stern expression. Before he could say a word, Vader fell to his knees. Master, please. I remember, a few years ago I told you I wanted to leave the Jedi Order. You told me you were ready to leave it with me if that truly would be my decision. Vader met Obi-Wan's eyes, fake but convincing tears welling up in his eyes. I'm asking you to follow me now, as you were willing to do so then. I will not allow my mother to be killed. If you won't join me, I will go alone, and by tomorrow my disappearance will be noted, and surely I will be expelled from the Jedi Order. But if you leave with me now for Tatooine, we can save her and be back by tomorrow. The Jedi Council doesn't need to know, Master. We can think up an excuse for why we had to leave. Some sort of urgent mission. We may be disciplined by the Council, but with you vouching for me, I can remain a Jedi. I don't want to stop being a Jedi, but I will if I must. If it means I'm able to save my mother. Tears streamed down Darth Vader's face as he locked eyes with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan remembered the promise he made to Qui-Gon to train this boy, and he indeed was willing to leave the Jedi Order if Anakin chose to leave it a few years back. Obi-Wan knew that when he agreed to train this boy, it would be no easy task. It was no secret to Obi-Wan and the Jedi Council that Anakin had much fear in him. Obi-Wan knew that if Anakin's mother were to die, he would be filled with a rage and hatred greater than ever before, and would be more susceptible than ever into slipping into the dark side. If Anakin were to leave by himself, it's questionable whether or not he would be successful, or if he would be able to control himself. He also thought of losing Qui-Gon, and how if he had a second chance to save him, he would take it. Although he knew the Jedi Council would not fully approve of this, Obi-Wan felt he had no other choice. He stood up and offered a hand to Vader, saying, "Then there's no time to waste." Well guys, I really hope you enjoyed. And once again, even if this video doesn't do as well as that first one, for those people who are excited to watch part 2 after having watched part 1, I hope this was enjoyable for you. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. And I hope that you just have an absolutely incredible day, or night, or afternoon. Don't worry, I don't think that's going to be my catchphrase. I just think it's kind of funny. But yeah, thank you so much. And peace.